Welcome back to today's Photo Minute, sponsored by the Photo Classroom. My name is Brian Osborne, and it's been a great week. We've been sharing different posts with you on different things, and many of you probably recognize that this scene behind me, literally right over my shoulder, is where some of the deer pictures and the actual session that we did on where we actually filmed us photographing the deer and changing the white balance and giving you an illustration of that, were actually photographed. And in the midst of that experience the other day, I was able to capture a picture that I posted as our backyard wildlife photo of the day on our Instagram page and on our Facebook page as well. And I called it Triple Deer. It was kind of a unique image of all three deer with some beautiful light. And I just wanted to kind of break down what I was thinking and what went into capturing that image. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures up on the screen here. This is the actual image that I captured after I had it edited. Really liked it, and many of you liked it as well. So thank you for that. It was exciting to be able to capture it and to actually get something a little bit more unique than I even realized at the time. But I wanted to show you kind of where I started with that process in general. And so I started off photographing. I had my camera already set up with my default settings. My default settings of aperture priority mode and f6.3, the lowest aperture on the lens that I was using. I was set up an auto ISO with a minimum shutter speed of 500th of a second. We had a session of that earlier this week where we talked about that setting, and that gave me a ISO of about 4500, so getting up there, but not uncommon for wildlife, especially at dusk. I was in continuous focusing mode, and I was in dynamic 9, which is kind of a smaller selection of autofocus area points that I was using for this. As is my custom, I always start at a minus exposure compensation because often with a dark backdrop, the camera tends to overexpose your subject matter. So I went ahead and started to compensate for that even before I took pictures with a minus 2/3 exposure compensation. I was set up at 5200 degrees Kelvin, which would be similar to auto white balance on my camera. And then I was using my Sigma 150 to 600 that I use for most of my wildlife shots. As I was photographing the first deer, another deer came out, and so that kind of changes the scenario. Now I've got to decide, am I going to stay focused on one deer? Am I going to focus on both deer? What am I going to do? And but I did take the opportunity at this point to go ahead and switch my white balance to something that was going to be a little bit warmer and a little bit more pleasing. And so I went to cloudy white balance and decided to focus in on the one deer as he was looking into the light. Just thought it was a beautiful light, and just to focus in on the one deer, at least for the next few seconds of this process. I recomposed, I went to horizontal, came in even tighter, and just wanted to get just the deer's head looking into that sun, leave some space compositionally in front of the head for that deer to look into visually in the picture. The two deer then started to graze, and I thought, well, that'd be kind of neat. So I went ahead and started photographing the deer grazing, and knowing that we might be able to use some of these examples as just white balance examples for some of our lessons, I went ahead and switched my camera back to auto white balance. It's certainly not the white balance I knew I wanted, but it's the one that I knew would give us some examples of the bluish tone versus the warmer tone of cloudy. Then I saw all three deer and kind of come into the frame, and their heads started coming up. And so I went ahead and thought, I might be able to get a picture of all three deer. Now my goal was all three deer looking the same way. I pulled it off with two deer. I've done some images earlier this year where I had two deer looking into the light, all the same direction. I thought, well, maybe I'll get an opportunity to get all three deer in this picture. It almost happened, but as you can tell, that even though all three deer were looking in roughly the same direction, the heights of the heads were not correct, and so I wasn't able to see the background, the third deer in the back. Okay, I did realize that I had already changed my white balance back to cloudy. You can actually see that the color tone had shifted from the previous image that I showed you. But I also realized that I had a technical issue, and that was that there was no chance that I could capture all three heads with any kind of sharpness whatsoever without increasing my depth of field. So at this point, through the viewfinder, with just the wheel and just holding down and spinning the wheel, I actually changed my aperture back up to f13. I knew that if I went any higher, I'd probably run out of ISO because I really didn't have that much light in the situation, but I knew that if I didn't get it up to f13, I had no chance of getting all three deer relatively sharp in the image with the lacking of depth of field that I would have at 6.3. This is the actual frame that I got the triple deer picture out of. I did a little bit of cropping, a little bit of editing to it, but this is the actual frame. At the time, I don't know if I realized that all three deer's heads and the directions that they were looking were really going to be a shot that I was really going to love in the end. But I did know that all three subjects were in the frame. I had some extra space around the sides, and I knew that I probably had the technical settings, both the white balance and the increased aperture, to probably get this shot if there was something good there to be had. You can tell that only 2 seconds after the shot that I love the most happened, this was another picture I took, and now you can see one deer's head dropping his head, the other deer is blocked. So you can see how quickly these things change, and so you just got to be ready and hopefully have all the technical as well as the compositional thought process together to try to capture this image. I eventually decided that all three deer probably were not going to cooperate again, and so I went back down to my low aperture and focused in on a fourth deer that had kind of come up from the background. And you can see that even in this other frame that the three deer's heads never really came back. I had one deer up, one deer down. And so even in this shot, if I wanted to focus in on the deer's head in the center of the frame, it wouldn't be a clean background because I have the other back of the deer behind this one. So it's all, to me, about what's in the frame and what's outside of the frame, as well as what makes up a clean background. And so that's... I really never had another opportunity to get that one shot that I had captured. This is the shot once again. I just wanted to give you the final checklist settings that were used for this. I was in aperture priority mode. I was at f13. I was using auto ISO with a minimum shutter speed of 1/500th of a second, but you might be asking, as you see it on the screen, why was my camera only at 400th of a second shutter speed when I had told the camera to give me 1/500th? The answer is because I had set the auto ISO to be maximum ISO of 8,000. And so the time where the camera cannot meet my request of the minimum shutter speed is when it does run out of ISO. And in this case, it did run out of the ISO. And so it was only able to give me 400th of a second, even though I had the parameter set up to give me 500th of a second shutter speed. I was in continuous focusing, dynamic 9. I didn't focus on the front deer, I didn't focus on the back deer, I focused on the second deer and just hoped that I had enough depth of field to give me a fairly sharp image of all three subjects. I was at my minus exposure compensation, I was on cloudy white balance, and I was at about 480 millimeters out of the total range of my 150 to 600 millimeter lens. I hope this has been helpful just to give you a little bit of background between what I was thinking and what happened, how quickly it happened, how I was thinking compositionally, but also had to get some technical things taken care of in terms of cloudy white balance and getting enough depth of field to even have a chance of getting the shot. It was just a neat opportunity, and to get the combination of heads, I was really happy with the final result. But wanted to show you some of what went into a very few seconds in order to capture the image that I enjoyed and that some of you enjoyed as well. I hope this has been helpful. Continue to get out with your camera, continue to practice. My name is Brian Osborne at today's Photo Minute.